Same week, same size, a TCL at 1198 measures brighter than a Sony at 2599. Both companies published those numbers themselves. Hi, this is Chris, and no, that's not a typo, and it isn't a clearance TV against a new one. Both of those sets are on shelves right now. So, here's what I actually want to answer today, because it's the question sitting in that browser tab you've had open for 2 weeks. Which TCL is the cheapest one that genuinely embarrasses a Sony? There are 2 answers. Only one of them comes without an asterisk, and the cheap answer is cheaper than most people would believe. If you'd rather have somebody read the whole lineup spec rows than read them yourself at 10 at night, subscribing is how that keeps happening. 9 models, 9. And the thing separating half of them is one letter on the box. K is last year, L is this year. Both are stacked in the same aisle at the same time at prices that cross each other, which is the whole reason nobody can shop this brand without a spreadsheet. But that's not even the part that got me. Every headline number on this lineup, the 6,000 nits, the 100% color, belongs to a panel most people aren't buying. Change the size, change the television. And 2 of these sets quietly leave out a layer that decides what your end seat looks like. Numbers first, brand second. Let's take the latter apart from the bottom. Start with the shape of this thing because the shape is where people lose money. TCL is selling 2 model years at the same time in the same aisle at prices that overlap. The 2026 sets carry an L, last year's sets carry a K, and the L sets got discounted so fast after launch that the new ones now sit underneath some of the old ones on price, which breaks the one rule everybody shops by: newer costs more. So no, this isn't a ladder. It's 2 ladders leaning on each other and the rungs cross. 9 models, near enough. An entry QLED with no mini LED in it at all, a mini LED entry pair, one on Google TV, one on Fire TV, priced $2 apart, 2 SQD mini LEDs that are the actual 2026 story, an RGB mini LED that only exists at 85 inches and up, and a flagship that costs more than the car most people drive to the store in. To be fair, TCL isn't hiding any of that. It's all published. The problem is the number it's published next to. And this is the part I want on the record early before anybody gets attached to a price. The cheapest answer to today's question is not the cheap set. It's $300 north of it, and that's the gap I'm going to make you feel before this is over. Okay, so myth 1, and it's the one that costs most people the most money in this brand, the word QLED on the box tells you the picture will punch. It doesn't. Quantum dots, a layer that converts blue LED light into narrow red and green, improve color purity. That's it. That's the whole job. They do nothing about how much light the set can make and nothing about how precisely it can switch light off. The entry Q-Class set at $428, and that price includes a $30 rebate that dies September 7th, has quantum dots and no mini LED backlight underneath them. So you get accurate-ish color on a set that has no real ability to darken part of the frame while brightening another part, which means every HDR movie you feed it gets flattened. Not ruined, flattened. The sunlight and the shadow arrive at the same intensity, and the whole reason you paid for HDR quietly evaporates. And I know exactly what half of you are thinking, because it's the correct instinct in most other years. For that money, get the bigger screen. 75 inches of QLED beats 65 inches of mini LED, right? My read is no, not in this lineup, not at these prices, and I'll defend it. Between a bigger flat panel and a smaller one that can actually control its own backlight, I take control every time. That's one where I know a chunk of you will disagree hard, so say it in the comments. Bigger flat or smaller controlled? And there's something I should say about the 2 brand new Fire TV QLED lines that landed this year, the F7D and the F8D. I don't have measurements on them. Nobody does yet. No lab has published a nit figure or a zone count I'd repeat out loud, so I'm not going to pretend. What I can tell you is what the badge does and doesn't guarantee. And on this brand right now, the badge guarantees the dots and nothing behind them. Buy measured, not announced. Now, the set most people in this video are actually going to buy. 65-inch QM6K, $697.99 as of this week, down from $799. Myth 2, this is a 1500 nit television. You'll see that figure floating around in write-ups. Instrumented testing in HDR filmmaker mode put it at 812 nits on a 10% window, sustaining 642. In standard dynamic range content, cable, sports, most of what actually plays on it, 627 peak, 572 sustained. That's a real number, not a box number. And the gap between 812 and 642 is not a rounding error, it's the mechanism, so stay with me for 1 second. A mini LED backlight has a fixed total power budget. Light a tenth of the screen, and every watt in the driver can be dumped into that tenth. You get your headline figure. Light the whole screen, a hockey rink, a snow field, a bright white streaming menu, and that same budget has to spread across all of it. The set dims itself to stay inside its own electrical limit. So the number on the box is measured in the one condition your living room almost never produces. Here's what the QM6K does earn though, and I'm going to be unfairly interested in it for a minute because zone counts are my personal obsession, and you should know that about me. Roughly 500 dimming zones at 65 inches. Zones are independently controlled blocks of backlight, the resolution at which the set can turn light off. More zones, smaller hollows around bright objects, deeper black in the parts of the frame that should be black. $500 at $700 is not a token amount. It's the difference between subtitles that sit on black and subtitles that float in a gray cloud. And the difference between $697.99 and what this set is worth is the whole argument of this video, because it dropped to $497.99 last November, $200 6 weeks after Thanksgiving. $200 is a 2.1 soundbar with a wireless subwoofer sitting on the console under it plus change for the HDMI cable. Same room, same night, one price decision. And yes, I get that nobody wants to hear just wait in August with football starting. Anyway, back to it. The Fire TV Twin, the QM6L. I'm dispatching fast because it doesn't deserve a long segment. $699.99 tracks the QM6K within a couple of dollars at every size. Same class of panel, different software on top. That's it. That's the decision. Which interface you want to look at every night. Google or Alexa. Done. Moving past it. Okay, I'm pulling something forward that I had planned for the verdict because it belongs here, next to these two cheap sets, and holding it back would be dishonest. The QM6K and the QM6L both leave out the wide viewing angle layer. It's an optical film that holds color and brightness when you're off to the side, and the step-up sets have it. These two don't. Nobody shops for it. Nobody sees it in a store, because in a store, you stand dead center. You find out about it on a Sunday with the room full, when the person in the end seat of the sectional, the seat nobody fights over, is watching a grayer, paler version of the same game everybody else is enjoying. For a bedroom, one viewer, straight on, costs you nothing. For the room this set is actually going in, that's the parameter that decides whether 2 of your 6 seats are any good. Which brings me to the number I've been circling since the cold open, and I need you to hold 2 figures in your head going into the next stretch. Sony's cheapest mini LED, the 65-inch Bravia 5, measured just under 800 nits in professional mode, 384 dimming zones, $998 to $1098 depending on the week, down from a $1,500 launch. 812 against just under 800, 500 zones against 384, and $300 of daylight between them in TCL's favor. So, does that settle it? Is the $700 TCL the answer and we all go home? No, because Sony spends its money somewhere the nit figure can't see, and when you put those two sets in the same dark room with the same film running, one of them does something the other genuinely cannot. That's the next 15 minutes, and it's also where I found the number that made me recut the running order of this whole video. Let's pay off the question I left you with, because the answer isn't the one the price tags predict. 65-inch QM7L, $1197.99 this week, down from $1499.99 at launch 4 months ago. TCL rates it at 3,000 nits. Independent measurement 2,200 on one bench, roughly 2,400 in filmmaker mode on another. So the claim is inflated by about a quarter, which in this category is practically honest. And both of those figures are hundreds of nits above last year's QM7K. So the generation step is real, not repackaging. Now, Sony's $300, what does it actually buy against the QM6K we just took apart? Processing and out-of-box accuracy. That's the honest answer, and it's not nothing. The Bravia 5 measures accurate in its professional mode with no calibration at all. You take it out of the box, pick that mode, and you're looking at what the director graded. Its upscaling of cable and compressed streaming is a class above anything on this TCL ladder. Reviewers who dislike almost everything else about that set still credit its backlight control in dark scenes with bright highlights. So if If you watch mostly hockey feeds at 6 megabits and 1080p reruns, Sony spends its money on your actual diet. Numbers first, brand second, but that's a case where the brand's engineering shows up in a place the nit figure genuinely can't see, which sets up the thing most people get exactly backwards, so I want to slow down here. Sony's step-up set, the Bravia 7 II, has around 5100 dimming zones. The QM7L has up to 2100. That's more than double in Sony's favor, and every instinct says double the zones equals a brighter, better picture. It doesn't. Zones govern where light goes. They don't govern how much light exists. Total output is set by how many LED chips are back there and how hard the driver is allowed to push them before heat forces it to back off. A set with 5,000 zones and a conservative driver produces less light than a set with 2,000 zones and an aggressive one. It just distributes what it has with more precision. Zones buy you halo control. Drive current buys you brightness. Two different budgets, two different line items, and the marketing deliberately lets you conflate them. And to be fair, precision is worth real money. It's the reason Sony's dark scenes hold together. It is not the reason anybody's living room looks good at 3 in the afternoon. So I've priced what Sony's processing is worth. My read is $250, maybe $300 at this screen size. Below that gap, buy the Sony every time. And I know half of you think that number is insulting, that Sony's picture engine is worth whatever they ask full stop. Fine, then tell me the number, not it's worth it, the number. What is Sony's processing worth to you in dollars at 65 inches this month? I'll read them. Okay, this is the one that made me recut the running order of the video, and I nearly buried it in the verdict where nobody would have reached it. Everything I've quoted so far, the 812, the 2270, the 2000, is a small window figure, a patch of screen. Now, here's the same two sets measured with the whole screen lit white on one reviewer's bench, same methodology. Sony Bravia 7 II, 825 nits, full screen. TCL QM7L, 804, 21 nits apart? Wait, let me put that properly because saying it out loud again does something to me. The Sony that costs $2599.99 at 65 inches and the TCL that costs $1397.97 produce essentially identical light when the screen is full. A snowfield, a hockey rink, a paused white menu, a daytime studio show. 21 nits is a difference nobody has ever noticed in a room with a window in it. Let me show the work because I want checking me on this. $2599.99 minus $1397.99 is $1,202. Divide that by the 21 nits of full screen advantage, and Sony's premium is costing you about $57 per nit in the condition your room is in most of the day. And the assumption I'm making out loud, I'm treating both those full screen figures as comparable because they came off the same reviewer's bench with the same method. If you measured them in two different labs, 21 nits is inside the noise. The two sets would simply be tied. Either way, the conclusion moves in the same direction, which is the only reason I'm willing to build on it. Here's the limit of all of this, though, and it needs saying before anybody screenshots that arithmetic. Nits can't see everything. A brightness figure doesn't measure reflection handling, how much of your window the panel throws back at you. It doesn't measure tone mapping, which is how a set decides what to do with a movie graded for 4,000 nits when it only has 2,000. It doesn't measure whether color holds together at peak, and on this specific set, it wouldn't catch that very bright white highlights on the QM7L can pick up a faint blue cast. And the color claim on this generation is soft. TCL says the SQD layer covers the full BT 2020. Measurement puts it nearer 85%, and near enough everything you watch is graded to a smaller gamut anyway. What the numbers do support firmly is the shape of the decision. Sony wins the parts of the picture you notice after dark and in compressed content. TCL wins the light, the ports, the refresh rate, and the money. That's not a close call at a $1,200 gap. So the QM7L, $1397.99 at 65 against a $2499.99 list price, and it's the lowest that set has been since it arrived in April. $200 over the QM7L. And this is where I stop being annoyed at TCL for a minute, because that $200 is the best spent money anywhere on this ladder.
It buys real output, measured somewhere between 3,700 and north of 5,000 nits depending on size and pattern. It buys a 26-bit backlight controller, meaning finer steps in how each zone ramps its light, which is why blooming is hard to catch on it in normal viewing. It buys high refresh across all 4 HDMI 2.1 ports instead of 2, a Wi-Fi 6 instead of Wi-Fi 5, and an ATSC 3.0 tuner the QM7L doesn't have at all, so if there's an antenna on your roof, the cheaper set is disqualified before we start. And it buys back that wide viewing angle layer I pulled forward last segment, the one the QM6K skips. The end seat of the sectional gets a picture again. $200 spread across the 8 years people keep a television is about $25 a year. 2 large pizzas, once, to fix every one of those gaps at once. One more crossing on this ladder that almost nobody spots. The 85-inch QM7L and the 75-inch QM8L both sit at $1,697.99 right now. Identical money. 10 more inches or double the brightness and the better backlight controller. That's a genuine fork, and which way you go depends entirely on how much daylight is in the room. Above the QM8L, there are 2 more rungs. The RM9L, TCL's first RGB backlit set, which only exists at 85 inches and up, and the X11L flagship. I'm not quoting street prices on either one because the figures I have for them are stale, and I'm not putting a number in your head I can't stand behind this week. What I can tell you is the structural fact that matters. Testing found the QM8L's color lands close to the X11L's at a small fraction of the price. Whatever the flagship costs today, its own cheaper sibling has already eaten most of its argument, which leaves exactly one thing unresolved. I've told you the QM7L beats a Sony that costs $1,200 more. I've told you the QM6K matches Sony's cheapest mini LED for $300 less.
Both of those are wins. Only one of them survives being called an embarrassment without a footnote attached. And the footnote on the cheap one is bigger than I let on in the first 10 minutes. Next, which of those two is the real answer? Who each rung is actually for, and the 1 week of the year that changes all of it? Before the verdict, sort yourselves. Because this lineup doesn't have a best television, it has a best television per room, and the room is doing more work here than the badge is. If your set lives in a room with an uncovered window and the TV is on during daylight, you are buying light. Full screen light specifically, not peak. Everything else on the spec sheet is a footnote for you. If your set lives in a room with 6 seats and 2 of them are off to the side, you're buying that optical film, not the nits, the film. If 2 consoles are plugged in permanently, you're buying ports. And the trap is that eARC eats one of them. 4 HDMI 2.1 ports means 3 usable. 2 means 1. That's the arithmetic that ruins a Christmas morning. If an antenna is on the roof, you're buying a tuner, and that eliminates one of my 2 finalists. And if the room is dark, the door closes, and you watch films, my read is you shouldn't be in this category at all. At $1,300 to $1,800, there are clearance OLEDs on shelves right now that will beat every set on this ladder at what that room does. This brand's entire engineering advantage is light output, and a dark room doesn't use it. I'd rather send you out of the category than sell you the wrong strength. So, the cheapest TCL that embarrasses a Sony with nothing attached to it, 65-inch QM7L, $1,197.99. 2,270 measured nits against a Sony that measured 2,000 and asks $25.99. The cheaper set is the brighter set by a real margin, and the gap between them is $1,400. That's the answer to the question I opened this video with. And the cheaper answer, the one at $697, doesn't survive contact with it. Here's why. Pay off on the loop I've been carrying since the cold open. There were 2 candidates, and the QM6K is not the winner. 812 nits against Sony's just under 800, 500 zones against 384, $300 cheaper. On paper, that reads like a beating. It's a tie, and a tie isn't an embarrassment. 12 nits is a measurement rounding difference. The zone advantage is genuine, but Sony answers with processing and out-of-box accuracy the QM6K cannot touch, plus the fact that the QM6K leaves out the viewing angle layer. So what you've actually got at $700 is a set
set that matches Sony's cheapest mini LED on light and beats it on price while losing on picture polish and off-axis performance. That's a good buy. It is not the title of this video, and I'm not going to pretend it is to make the number smaller. The QM7L is where the word embarrasses becomes literally accurate. One brand's mid-tier set out-measuring another brand's premium RGB set for less than half the money. Best value in the whole brand, though, is not my headline answer. It's the QM8L at $1397.99. $200 over the QM7L buys back everything the QM7L gives up. 4 high refresh ports instead of 2, Wi-Fi 6, the ATSC 3.0 tuner, the wide-angle film, the 26-bit controller, and roughly double the measured output. There is no other $200 step anywhere in this lineup that returns that much. If you can find it, that's the one I'd put in my own room. Above that, my honest read is the ladder stops being worth climbing. The RGB set doesn't exist below 85 inches, the flagship gets beaten on color value by its own cheaper sibling, and the moment a lineup's premium tier is losing arguments to its mid-tier, the premium tier is priced for a badge, not a picture. Which brings me to the last thing that splits this audience, and I want the comments on it specifically. The QM6K hit $497.99 last November. It's $697.99 today. Same television, same panel, same everything. $200 apart, separated by 14 weeks. So the timing question isn't whether to wait, it's what you're buying with the wait. $200 or 3 months of watching football on the set you already hate. My position on the QM6K rung specifically, wait. That set has a proven floor and it isn't at it. On the QM7L and the QM8L, buy now. Those two are at genuine recorded lows this week. And this brand cut its 2026 sets by up to $1,000 off list within weeks of launch, which means the discount cycle already happened. There's no second act coming for them before the holidays. And I know exactly how that lands for some of you because half of this audience thinks a TV bought before Black Friday is money set on fire. So, which one are you? Buying this week or holding to late November? Tell me which set and which week because I'd genuinely like to see how that splits. 2 things to do the night the box opens, and they're both about protecting what you just spent. First, that consent screen during setup. Walk through it properly instead of tapping past it. The automatic content recognition options live in there, and TCL is still litigating on that subject while 2 of its rivals have already settled. 2 minutes of reading, once. Second, run the arrival test inside your return window, a 10% gray slide across the full screen to check uniformity and dirty screen effect, a white snow scene or a white menu to watch whether the panel dips when the whole frame lights, white subtitles on black for blooming. And before any of that, check the per size spec row against whatever review sold you on the set, because a review of the 75 is not a review of the 65. I said earlier that the size selector changes which television you get. That's why I pulled the viewing angle thing forward instead of saving it on this ladder. On this ladder, the 2 cheapest mini LEDs are a different class of set from the 2 above them, and the price tags don't announce it. Everything in this video came off published measurements and this week's actual shelf prices. The QM6K floor, the $57 a nit, all of it. If that's the kind of thing you'd rather have handed to you than dig out yourself, subscribe and I'll keep digging. And next video is the one this brand set up for me, the 2 cheapest ways to get 85 inches into an American living room this month. And which one is a mistake? One last piece I haven't given you because it's the piece that makes all of this usable in a store. That letter on the box does more than date the television. It tells you which side of the class line the set sits on. The 2 mini LEDs with the K and the 64 are the ones without the angle film, without the tuner, with 2 high-speed ports. The 2 with the 7 and the 8 after the L are the ones with all of it. 1 character, and it separates a set that serves 4 seats from a set that serves 6. Nobody puts that on a shelf tag. Nobody says it in a store. So next time you're standing in front of that end cap with a browser tab still open on your phone, don't read the price first. Find the letter. Then find the per size row and make the aisle prove its own numbers to you. Because that Sony at $25.99 is going to be sitting 6 feet away. And now you know exactly what it's charging you per nit.